Before we start, if you love powerful survival stories and the unbreakable bond between animals and humans, make sure to subscribe to Wildlife Legends. The wind howled like a wounded beast, tearing through the endless white expanse. Snowflakes, sharp as glass, sliced against my exposed skin. I pulled my fur-lined hood tighter, but it was no use. The Arctic showed no mercy. I had been out here for 2 days. 2 days since my sled dogs had collapsed, their frozen bodies now buried somewhere beneath the shifting ice. 2 days since my radio had gone silent, swallowed by the howling wind. And 2 days since I had last seen any sign of life. I was alone. Completely, terrifyingly alone. Or so I thought. It started as a shadow, something large moving just beyond the storm's veil. My heart pounded. Out here, a shadow that size could mean only one thing. A bear. I had no weapon. No means to defend myself. My hands, stiff and clumsy from the cold, fumbled for the small hunting knife at my belt. Useless. If a polar bear had decided I was its next meal, I wouldn't stand a chance. But then, through the swirling white, I saw her. A mother polar bear. And she wasn't hunting me. She was running. Her massive paws pounded the ice, her breath heavy, forming thick clouds in the freezing air. But it was her eyes that stopped me. Wild. Desperate. Terrified. Then I saw the reason. A tiny cub stumbled behind her, struggling to keep up. And behind them, something far worse. 2 men. Hunters. Their rifles were raised. I barely had time to think before the first shot rang out. The shot cracked through the frozen air like a whip, sharp and unforgiving. I flinched, expecting the mother bear to collapse, but she didn't. The bullet missed just barely. It struck the ice near her, sending up a spray of shattered frost. The cub let out a frightened squeal, its tiny legs trembling as it struggled to keep moving. The mother bear turned for just a second, eyes flicking toward her baby, but she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. I could feel the hunters closing in. They weren't amateurs. They moved like men who had done this before, their heavy boots crunching in perfect rhythm against the ice. And then it hit me. They weren't just hunting her. They were driving her toward me. I wasn't some accidental bystander in this. I was bait. Panic gripped my chest. If they wanted to corner the bear near me, it meant they weren't afraid of getting close. These weren't just poachers. They were professionals. And I was standing right in the middle of their trap. The second shot fired. This time it found its mark. The mother bear roared in agony, stumbling forward as red bloomed against her white fur. The cub let out a desperate wail, and for a second, just a second, she hesitated. She turned, nudging the cub with her bloodied snout, urging it forward. That hesitation almost cost her everything. The hunters advanced quickly, rifles raised, their breath heavy and visible in the cold air. I saw the glint in their eyes, merciless, cold, calculating. I had to do something. But what? I was unarmed, half-frozen, and weak from hunger. These men weren't just hunting for sport. They were here for something more. For me? The cub? The thought made my stomach churn. The mother bear locked eyes with me. I don't know why, but in that instant something shifted. She should have seen me as a threat. Another human. Another enemy. But she didn't. She saw something else. A chance. A gamble. A risk she had to take. And then, before I could even process it, she changed direction. She was coming toward me. The hunters swore in surprise, adjusting their aim. The bear barreled forward, the cub struggling to keep up. My survival instincts screamed at me to run, but I couldn't. My legs were frozen to the ground, whether from fear or the cold I didn't know. Then everything happened at once. One of the hunters raised his rifle, lining up the final shot. The mother bear roared, eyes burning with fury and desperation. The cub tripped, tumbling into the snow. And I, without thinking, lunged forward. I don't know why I did it. Maybe it was adrenaline. Maybe it was madness. But in that moment, I didn't see a bear. I didn't see a wild animal. I saw a mother fighting for her child. And I couldn't let her fight alone. I dove toward the cub, scooping it into my arms. It was warm, its fur soft against my frozen fingers. It wriggled, but it was too weak to fight back. The hunters froze in shock. "What the hell is he doing?" one of them barked. The other hesitated, rifle still trained on the mother bear. "I don't know, he's ruining the shot." The mother bear reached me, her massive form towering over me like a snow-covered mountain. My breath caught in my throat. This was it. She could kill me in one swipe. One bite. One mistake. Instead, she stopped. Panting. Bleeding. Eyes flicking between me and her cub. And in that moment, I saw it again. Recognition. A silent understanding. I wasn't the enemy. The hunters, however, were. The taller one cursed, raising his rifle again. Move or you're dead too. I didn't move. The mother bear didn't either. But the ice beneath us? It did. A loud crack split through the air. A sound that sent chills racing down my spine. The hunter's eyes went wide. The ice was breaking. And we were standing right on top of it. The ice groaned beneath us. A slow, deep rumble, like the belly of a beast awakening from its slumber. I didn't have to see it to know what was happening. I could feel it. The fragile surface beneath my feet was no longer solid. It was shifting, trembling, breaking. The taller hunter cursed, stumbling back. Move. Get off the ice. But it was too late. A deafening crack ripped through the air. The ground beneath me split. For a moment, everything seemed to hang in slow motion. I saw the mother bear's eyes widen, her body tensing. The cub in my arms let out a high-pitched whimper. And the hunters? Pure terror etched onto their faces. Then we fell. The world tilted, ice shattering beneath me, and suddenly there was nothing but open air and a freezing abyss below. The mother bear roared as she slipped, her massive body crashing down. The cub twisted in my grasp and I clenched my arms around it, holding on for dear life. Then, impact. The Arctic Ocean swallowed me whole. A shock like 1,000 knives pierced my skin. My lungs seized. My body screamed. The water was beyond cold, it was death itself. I was sinking. The weight of my coat, my boots, my own frozen limbs, it all dragged me downward into the black depths. The cub flailed, its tiny paws reaching for something, anything. And then a blur of white. The mother bear. She was there. Right there. I had seen polar bears swim before. I had read about their power in the water. But experiencing it firsthand? It was terrifying. Her massive paws sliced through the currents, her body twisting with impossible grace. She was built for this. I was not. The last bit of air in my lungs burned. My vision blurred. I couldn't hold on. Something grabbed me. Not a human hand. Not a rope. I felt them close around the back of my coat, not biting, not crushing, but gripping. Holding. The mother bear was dragging me up. I didn't have time to process the insanity of it. The water churned as she kicked, surging toward the surface with inhuman strength. The cub clung to my chest, shivering violently. Then, light. We broke through the surface. I gasped, sucking in a lungful of ice-cold air. My body convulsed, but I was alive. The mother bear surged forward, shoving me toward a jagged sheet of floating ice. I clawed at it, my numb fingers barely responding. Then, bang. A gunshot. The hunters. They were still alive. I turned my head just in time to see them scrambling onto solid ground. Their rifles were slick with ice, their faces twisted in frustration and fury. She saved him, the shorter one shouted, disbelief in his voice. The taller one spat on the ice. Doesn't matter. We end this now. I barely had a second to react before he aimed directly at the cub. My stomach dropped. I knew I couldn't move fast enough. I knew the mother bear was still struggling to pull herself from the water. And I knew, if that bullet hit. I didn't think. I acted. The instant he pulled the trigger, I did the only thing I could. I threw myself in front of the shot. Pain exploded through my shoulder. White-hot, searing agony. My body jerked back and for a moment I couldn't hear anything. Just the rush of blood in my ears. But I was still standing. And the cub? Alive. The hunters froze in shock. They hadn't expected that. They hadn't expected me to stand in the way. And neither had the mother bear. She moved before they could react. With a roar that shook the ice, she lunged forward. The pain in her body meant nothing. The cold meant nothing. The bullet wound meant nothing. Because they had threatened her cub. And for that she would not forgive. The hunters barely had time to lift their guns before she was upon them. And this time she wasn't running. The mother bear struck like a force of nature. The taller hunter barely had time to lift his rifle before her massive paw slammed into his chest. The impact sent him flying backward, his body crashing onto the ice with a sickening thud. His rifle skidded across the frozen ground, spinning out of reach. The second hunter panicked. His hands fumbled with his weapon, but he was too slow. Too late. The mother bear was already upon him. With a deep, guttural roar, she reared up to her full height, a towering beast of pure, primal fury. I should have been terrified. Every survival instinct in my body screamed at me to move, to run, to escape. But I didn't. Because for the first time I wasn't looking at a wild animal. I was looking at a mother fighting for her child. The hunter dropped his gun. His face twisted in pure terror as he scrambled backward, his boots slipping against the ice. No, wait. She didn't wait. With a powerful lunge, she sent him tumbling over the fractured ice. He screamed as his body hit the frozen surface, sending a web of cracks splintering beneath him. The ice groaned. And then, it gave way. The hunter let out a strangled cry as he plunged into the freezing water below. His arms flailed wildly, his breath coming in ragged gasps. I knew that feeling. The water didn't just chill you. It stole you. Your breath. Your strength. Your life. The man thrashed desperately, his fingers clawing at the jagged ice. But the more he struggled, the more the water pulled him under. For a split second my instincts kicked in. I was a human. He was a human. And humans, we help each other. Right? But then I saw the mother bear. She wasn't looking at him. She was looking at me. There was no growl. No threat. Just a question. Was I going to save the man who tried to kill her baby? The answer hit me like the Arctic wind. No. Because out here, in this frozen, merciless world, there were no second chances. There was only survival. The hunter let out one final, desperate scream before the icy water swallowed him whole. And then silence. The only sound was the wind howling over the ice. The mother bear exhaled. Not in victory, not in triumph, but in relief. It was over. Almost. Because the taller hunter, the first one she had knocked down, was still alive. I turned just in time to see him dragging himself to his feet, blood dripping from his mouth. He staggered, his movements sluggish, his face pale from shock. His gun was gone, his body battered. But his eyes burned with hatred. He wasn't done. And neither was the mother bear. She stepped forward, shoulders heaving, fur stained with blood. Her cub trembled beside me, its tiny body pressing against my chest. This wasn't over yet. One of them wasn't leaving this ice alive. And for the first time, I didn't know which one it would be. The taller hunter staggered back, clutching his ribs. His breath came in ragged gasps, a mix of pain and rage twisting his face. He knew he had lost. But he wasn't the kind of man who accepted defeat. His eyes darted to his belt. A knife. Steel glinted in the pale Arctic light. My stomach clenched. I knew what he was thinking. If he couldn't shoot the bear, he'd take her down with his own hands. He lunged. Fast. Desperate. Reckless. The mother bear moved to shield her cub, but she was tired. Her wounds slowed her down. She wasn't fast enough. The hunter's knife slashed forward, aimed for her throat. I moved. I don't know if it was instinct or if something deep inside me had already made the choice. But before the blade could reach her, I threw myself between them. The knife plunged into my side. I gasped. A burning, searing pain tore through me. My legs buckled. The world tilted. The hunter's eyes widened in shock. He hadn't expected that. Neither had I. I collapsed onto the ice, the cold biting through me. My fingers clutched at the wound, but the warmth was already spreading, too fast. The mother bear let out a sound I had never heard before. Not a roar. Not a growl. Something softer. Something pained. She looked at me not as a human, not as a threat, but as something more. The hunter took a step back. He wasn't looking at me anymore. He was looking at her. And in that moment he realized something. He had made a mistake. Because the mother bear was no longer defending herself. She was avenging me. With one last, earth-shaking roar, she charged. I saw the sheer power in her movement, the force of the wild itself, unchained, unstoppable. The hunter tried to run. But he wasn't fast enough. She struck. One swipe. That's all it took. His body collapsed onto the ice, motionless. It was over. The silence that followed felt heavy. The wind howled, the ice groaned beneath us, and the Arctic stretched endlessly in all directions, vast, empty, and untouched. I shivered. The pain in my side was growing worse, my breath coming shorter. This was it. I had saved the bear. But I wasn't going to survive. I closed my eyes, letting the exhaustion take me. And then, a warmth. A heavy weight beside me. A heartbeat. I opened my eyes. The mother bear was there. She lay down beside me, curling her massive body around me. Blocking the wind, pressing warmth against my freezing skin. She was keeping me alive. She had chosen to save me. Just as I had saved her. The cub nestled against me, its small body trembling. I felt my breath slow, my heartbeat steady. Somewhere in the endless, frozen horizon, dawn was breaking. The Arctic sky burned with colors, deep blues, fiery reds, and streaks of gold. And in that moment, as I lay between the mother bear and her cub, I realized something. This wasn't just survival. This was trust. This was family. And for the first time in my life, I belonged.